A policeman unknowingly attacked a pregnant woman in a wheelchair, unaware of her husband's identity. What unfolded next was truly astonishing. Maria maneuvered her wheelchair through the park's broad paths. With her hands firmly on the wheels, she headed towards the entrance. Maria, a black woman in her late 30s, faced a challenging pregnancy that necessitated the use of a wheelchair in recent months. Yet, she navigated these difficulties with grace. Today was meant to be special. Her husband Derek, an FBI agent, had promised to join her and their son Jordan at the park after wrapping up some urgent work. Maria decided to start their day early, keen on letting Jordan enjoy the rides without delay. As they neared the disability access area, Maria's resolve hardened. She was determined to make this a joyful day for Jordan, despite her exhaustion. Jordan, full of energy, ran around her, his bright eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mom, can we ride the big Ferris wheel first?" he pleaded, pulling on her dress. "Of course, sweetheart, but we need to pick up a special pass first," Maria responded, guiding her wheelchair towards the accessible entrance. The path to the entrance was calm, lined with trees offering welcome shade. At the gate, a security guard stood with his arms crossed, giving Maria a wary look. Something about his demeanor, suspicious and almost disdainful, immediately put her on edge. Maria maintained her composure and greeted him politely. "Hello, we need access to the ride area. I have all necessary documents here," she said, holding up a folder. The guard scrutinized Maria and Jordan without moving to assist. "Are you sure you belong here?" he questioned gruffly. "This area is reserved for those who truly need it." Maria's smile waned as she absorbed the implications of his words. Taking a deep breath to stay calm, she replied, "I do need it. I'm pregnant and have been using a wheelchair due to complications." The guard briefly glanced at her documents with skepticism. "You don't seem like you need it that much," he remarked, adding, "People often exploit the system for special treatment." Maria felt a sting from his dismissive tone. Jordan, sensing his mother's distress, clung tighter to the wheelchair. Maria held the folder firmer, her frustration and anxiety rising. Looking down at Jordan, then firmly at the guard, she kept her voice even. "I understand your concerns, but I assure you, I am here because I need this access." "I'm not attempting to exploit anything," she stated, her tone firm yet controlled. "I have every right to use this entrance, and I can present my medical documents for verification." The guard's face remained unyielding, his look turning even icier as he stepped closer, sneering down at her. "You know, some folks believe they're entitled to whatever they want just by claiming they have an issue," he remarked. "But we need to ensure that only those who truly require it receive it." Maria's patience was fading, but she was determined not to create a spectacle, particularly in front of her son. She opened her folder, presenting the medical documents to him. "Here are my papers," she offered, extending them towards the guard. "Please, take a look for yourself." He barely skimmed the documents before dismissively shaking his head. "That's not sufficient," he claimed. "Anyone could get a doctor's signature on something. I need more than just papers." The refusal hit Maria hard, not just because of his denial, but also due to his accusatory tone, suggesting she was trying to deceive him, that she somehow didn't belong. The tension escalated, drawing the attention of nearby visitors who turned their curious gazes towards them. Maria felt a wave of humiliation and anger as she noticed their stares. "Please," she implored, her voice strained as she fought to maintain her composure, "I'm not looking to cause trouble. I'm just here to have a pleasant day with my son." But the guard was already shaking his head again. "I need to report this," he announced, pulling a radio from his belt. "We've had too many attempts to game the system lately. Better safe than sorry." As the guard called in for backup, Maria's anxiety soared. She looked down at Jordan, who clung to the wheelchair, his expression fraught with concern. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" he whispered. "It's okay, sweetie. We're just sorting out a little issue," Maria reassured him, though her own nerves were fraying. As she listened to the guard requesting police assistance over the radio, a sense of helplessness overwhelmed her. Despite providing her documentation and explaining her situation, it wasn't enough. It seemed he had already judged her, possibly influenced by her being a black woman in a wheelchair. The onlookers' stares weighed heavily on her, their murmurs barely audible as the scene continued to unfold. A crackling voice responded over the guard's radio, confirming that an officer would arrive soon. Maria's heart sank. She had wanted to avoid any escalation, especially with the police, aware of how these situations could unpredictably turn. Memories of incidents she'd read about flashed through her mind, stories of routine encounters that had ended tragically. She couldn't bear the thought of her son witnessing such an event. But now it seemed there was no way to turn back. The guard clipped his radio back onto his belt and crossed his arms again, his stern gaze unwavering. "You'll have to wait here until the officer arrives," he declared. "Then we'll sort this out." Maria gripped the wheelchair's handles, her knuckles whitening as she struggled to maintain her composure. She had hoped for a joyful day at the park, but now she found herself on the verge of a confrontation she had not anticipated and did not know how to handle. As she sat there with Jordan by her side, the cheerful sounds of the amusement park seemed to recede, leaving only the heavy air of tension. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. Jordan stayed close, his eyes darting around nervously. Maria reached out to touch his arm, attempting to project the calm she herself did not feel, while inside, her mind churned with worry about what might come next. Before long, the flashing lights of a police cruiser appeared in the distance. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as they turned to watch the vehicle approach. The officer who stepped out was a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw, his expression one of impatience. His name tag read Jabe Thompson. He walked towards Maria, his demeanor shifting to one of thinly veiled disdain as the guard hurried over to brief him. Though Maria couldn't catch every word, the tone was unmistakably skeptical. "Ma'am," Officer Thompson began, his voice laden with authority, "I understand there's an issue here with you using a wheelchair to access this area. There are concerns about the legitimacy of your need." Maria's jaw clenched at his words, the skepticism in his voice clear. She inhaled deeply, striving to keep her voice steady. "I have shown the guard my medical documents," she explained, holding up the folder once more. "I'm pregnant and have complications that severely limit my mobility. That's why I need this wheelchair." Officer Thompson looked at the documents briefly, then met her gaze with a raised eyebrow. "Anyone could obtain a doctor's note," he said dismissively. "You're going to need to do more to prove your case." The guard, encouraged by the officer's stance, added loudly enough for bystanders to hear, "I've been saying we've got too many folks trying to scam the system." Maria felt a surge of anger. It wasn't just their questioning of her honesty, it was the manner in which they addressed her, as if she were inherently untrustworthy, as if her documentation and her word meant nothing. And she knew it wasn't just about her wheelchair. It was also about her being a black woman, which made the accusations sting even more. Her voice shook as she responded, "I am not trying to cheat anything. I'm here with my son, intending to enjoy our day at the park. I have every right to be here." Officer Thompson's expression hardened. "If that's the case, then why don't you stand up and show us you really need that wheelchair?" he challenged, his tone harsh. "If you're genuinely unable to walk, proving it shouldn't be difficult." The demand felt like an insult. It was not only that he doubted her, but that he expected her to perform some sort of test to verify her condition, as though she were on trial. "I cannot stand up," Maria replied, her teeth gritted. "I've told you, My condition makes it dangerous for me to walk." The officer stepped closer, his tone becoming more menacing. "It seems to me like you're just trying to make a scene," he accused. "And if you don't cooperate, you might be charged with obstructing an investigation." Maria clenched the arms of her wheelchair. The disbelief at what she was hearing was overwhelming. It seemed that no matter how rational and calm she tried to be, her words were being twisted against her. Her heart raced, and frustration overwhelmed her as she felt her face heat up. "I'm not obstructing anything," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. He snapped at the crowd. "This is a security matter, not a public debate." Maria's resolve hardened amidst the tension. "I'm just trying to explain my situation," she said, her voice now steady despite the overwhelming circumstances. Officer Thompson, however, was not interested in dialogue. "I've heard enough of your excuses," he interjected sharply. "Now, either stand up to prove your need for that wheelchair, or I'll have to remove you from the park." His hand reached for the handcuffs on his belt, eliciting shocked gasps from the bystanders. Jordan, small and frightened, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, what's happening? Are they going to take you away?" His wide eyes brimmed with tears, his voice quivering with fear. Hearing her son's worry snapped Maria back to the moment. She turned to him, her hand gently stroking his hair to offer reassurance, though her own heart was fraught with fear. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," she whispered, trying to believe her own words. The officer glanced down at Jordan, his expression unyielding. "And who's this?" he demanded. "Is your son involved in this situation?" Maria's protective instincts surged. "Leave him out of this," she asserted sharply, her eyes flashing with defiance. "He's just a child." Officer Thompson's face remained stone-like. "If you don't comply, we may have to take measures to ensure both your safety and his," he threatened. "That could include taking him into custody until we sort this out." The threat hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud over the scene. Maria felt her heart pound furiously, the stakes suddenly much higher. Not only was her own safety on the line, but now they were threatening to take her son as well. A mix of helplessness and rising determination filled her. This was no longer a mere misunderstanding. It was a blatant assault on her rights and dignity. Drawing a deep, shaky breath, Maria faced Officer Thompson squarely. "You're treating me like a criminal," she declared, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "All I've done is attempt to use the accessible entrance, which I have every right to do. I've shown you my documents. I've explained my situation. There's no reason for this treatment." The officer sneered, his hand still hovering near his handcuffs. "Like I said, I don't believe you," he retorted. "If you don't comply, we'll have no choice but to take you in." By now, the crowd had grown significantly, and murmurs of disapproval began to ripple through the onlookers. Several people had taken out their phones to record the incident, and shouts of support for Maria were beginning to resonate. "Leave her alone. She hasn't done anything wrong," one bystander called out. "This is discrimination," another exclaimed. For a moment, it seemed the officer might relent under the weight of public scrutiny. Yet, rather than de-escalating, he appeared more determined. "You all need to mind your own business," he barked at the crowd. "This is a security issue." Maria, bolstered by the public support, knew she had to stand firm. She was not only fighting for her rights, but also for her dignity and the safety of her son. The confrontation had escalated far beyond what she had ever imagined when planning a simple day at the park. The situation without escalating the tension further. Derek took a deep breath, trying to regain some control over the unfolding events. "Look, I'm an FBI agent," he said, his voice firm yet calm, hoping to bring some authority to his words. "You are making a significant mistake here. The mention of his FBI status caused a brief pause in the action. Officer Thompson and his partner exchanged a glance, the uncertainty momentarily visible in their eyes. However, Thompson's demeanor hardened again as he faced Derek. "Show me your badge, then," he demanded, skepticism lacing his tone. Derek, with his free hand, carefully reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out his badge and holding it up for the officers to see. The crowd, sensing a shift in the narrative, quieted down slightly, their phones still recording every detail. Thompson took a step forward to inspect the badge, his expression turning from doubt to concern. "Okay, let's all take a moment here," he said, signaling his partner to ease his grip on Derek. Derek adjusted his stance, rubbing his shoulder where the officer had grabbed him, his gaze never leaving Thompson. "My wife has shown you her medical documentation. She is not fabricating her need for accessibility. This confrontation is unnecessary and is only escalating due to your actions," Derek stated, his tone measured but firm. Thompson looked from Derek to Maria, who was trying to comfort Jordan, still sobbing by her side. The officer's face showed a hint of regret as he reconsidered the situation. "All right, we're going to step back and reassess this," he finally said, gesturing to his partner to back off. "Sorry for the misunderstanding." The crowd murmured, some clapping and shouting in support of Maria and Derek, relieved to see the tension de-escalate. Derek turned to Maria, his hand gently squeezing her shoulder, his presence a reassurance that they were now out of immediate danger. Maria looked up at Derek, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and lingering fear. "Thank you," she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. Derek nodded, then addressed the crowd, his voice clear. "Thank you all for your support. It's important to stand up for what's right and ensure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity." As the officers retreated, the onlookers began to disperse, discussing the incident among themselves, many still shaking their heads in disbelief at the confrontation they had witnessed. Derek helped Maria adjust in her wheelchair, ensuring she was comfortable before turning to Jordan, who was wiping tears from his cheeks. "It's okay now, buddy," Derek said softly, kneeling to be at eye level with his son. "Let's try to enjoy the rest of our day here, okay?" Jordan nodded, sniffling, and leaned into his father for a hug. Maria, Derek, and Jordan slowly made their way back into the park, the day's earlier promise of joy now tempered by the ordeal they had endured. However, Derek's intervention had not only prevented the situation from worsening, but also highlighted the need for understanding and compassion in the face of adversity. As they moved forward, the family held on to each other a little tighter, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced together. The atmosphere charged with palpable tension and the crowd's support bolstering their cause. Derek's authoritative declaration seemed to alter the dynamics of the confrontation. Officer Thompson, now visibly uncertain and his authority challenged by Derek's federal credentials, took a moment to reassess the situation. His eyes darted between Derek, the cheering crowd, and his partner, who appeared equally conflicted about how to proceed. Thompson cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Okay," he started, his voice less commanding than before. "Let's all take a step back and figure this out calmly." The younger officer, relieved at the shift in tone, quickly released Derek's wrists from the cuffs and stepped back, giving the family some space. The crowd, sensing a potential resolution, quieted down slightly but remained attentive, their phones still recording. Derek, with a protective arm around Maria, addressed Thompson again, his tone firm but composed. "I appreciate you reconsidering. My wife needs immediate medical attention, not undue stress and confrontation. She's not just a disabled person. She's a pregnant woman who is trying to enjoy a day out with her family." Thompson nodded, perhaps recognizing the gravity of the situation and the potential repercussions of his earlier actions. "I understand. We may have acted hastily," he admitted. We'll take no further action without proper verification and more sensitive handling of this situation." Maria, her voice still shaky but relieved, added, "Thank you for understanding. All we wanted was a peaceful day in the park." As the tension began to dissipate, some of the onlookers approached to offer words of support to Derek and Maria, praising Derek's courage and Maria's resilience. Others continued to discuss the incident among themselves, likely pondering the implications of authority and civilian rights in everyday situations. With the immediate crisis resolved, Derek took a moment to address the crowd. "Thank you all for your support," he said. "Standing together made a difference today. It's important to hold those in power accountable, especially when the rights and dignity of individuals are at stake." Officer Thompson, now in a conciliatory mode, offered an apology to Derek and Maria. "I apologize for the distress we caused. It was not our intention to escalate the situation this way." The crowd's mood shifted from tense to a more relieved and supportive atmosphere as the officers slowly retreated from the scene. Their departure met with a mix of relief and continued murmurs from the public. Derek and Maria, along with their son Jordan, took a few moments to regroup and compose themselves after the officers left. Despite the ordeal, they decided to continue their day in the park, trying to reclaim some of the joy that had been overshadowed by the confrontation. As they moved on, the experience remained a poignant reminder of the importance of empathy, respect, and community support in facing challenges and injustices. The family's bond, strengthened by the day's events, was a testament to their resilience and the collective power of a community's moral support. The air was charged with palpable indignation as the crowd's anger mounted. Derek's voice, firm and commanding, cut through the tumult. "This is not just a violation of rights. It's endangering a pregnant woman's life." His words resonated, amplifying the crowd's unrest. Thompson hesitated, his resolve faltering under the intense scrutiny and the undeniable evidence of Maria's distress. The younger officer, his anxiety apparent, approached Thompson, whispering urgently, "Sir, this is going wrong. We need to reassess. She clearly needs help." Thompson, visibly conflicted but still holding on to his authority, paused, his hand still on Maria's wheelchair. The cries of the crowd and Jordan's pleading look seemed to penetrate the chaotic scene, reaching a critical moment of decision. "We will call an ambulance," Thompson finally conceded, his voice less certain. He stepped back, signaling to his partner to lower his radio and call for medical assistance. His gaze shifted uncomfortably from Maria to the crowd and back, the reality of the potential consequences of his actions becoming starkly apparent. Derek, though still tense, nodded slightly, acknowledging the shift. "We need to ensure she's safe," he said, addressing both the officers and the crowd. He turned his attention back to Maria, kneeling beside her and taking her hand. "It's going to be okay," he reassured her, though his eyes still held a fierce protective glint. As the ambulance siren could be heard approaching, the crowd's anger began to subside into concerned murmurs and supportive shouts for Maria. The tension eased slightly, but the gravity of the situation remained heavy in the air. Thompson, now standing back, watched the scene unfold with a complex look of regret and relief. It was clear that the day's events had escalated far beyond what he had anticipated, and the public's reaction had been a sobering reminder of the responsibilities that came with his badge. The ambulance arrived swiftly, and medical personnel quickly attended to Maria, ensuring she was stable and addressing her immediate needs. The crowd dispersed gradually, many exchanging words of support to Derek and Maria, and others discussing the incident animatedly among themselves. As Maria was carefully loaded into the ambulance, Derek stayed close, his hand never leaving hers. He turned once more to Thompson, his look one of stern warning mixed with a slight acknowledgment of the officer's eventual decision to call for medical help. "This could have been avoided," Derek stated firmly. "Let's hope it's a lesson learned." Thompson nodded, the weight of the day's events etching a deep line of contemplation on his face. As the ambulance doors closed and it pulled away, the officer stood watching, the crowd's earlier chants echoing in his mind, a stark reminder of the delicate balance between enforcing the law and preserving human dignity. Jordan, now somewhat calmer but still clinging to Derek, looked up at his father. "Is Mommy going to be okay?" he asked, his voice small. "She's going to be just fine," Derek reassured him, squeezing his shoulder. "We're going to make sure of it." As they followed the ambulance to the hospital, the impact of the day's confrontation lingered, a potent reminder of the community's power when united and the profound implications of every action taken in the line of duty. Thompson's aggressive demeanor. "Is that true? Are you with the FBI?" he asked, looking for confirmation while simultaneously assessing the volatile environment. Derek nodded firmly, pulling out his badge once more for the sergeant to see. "Yes, I am," he replied, his voice steady. "And I've been trying to protect my wife. She's in distress and needs medical attention, not harassment." The sergeant took a moment to examine the badge closely, his expression turning from skepticism to understanding. "All right," he said, handing back the badge. He then turned to Thompson with a stern look. "Stand down, Officer Thompson. We need to handle this situation properly." Thompson's face reddened with frustration, but, seeing the determination in the sergeant's eyes and the crowd's growing agitation, he reluctantly stepped away from Maria's wheelchair. The sergeant then addressed the crowd, raising his hands in a gesture meant to calm them. "We appreciate your concern," he announced. "We will ensure that this lady receives the care she needs and review all actions taken here today. Please give us space to resolve this situation peacefully." The crowd, though still murmuring with residual anger, began to disperse slowly, their trust in the sergeant's words cautiously optimistic but still wary. Turning back to Derek and Maria, the sergeant spoke in a more gentle tone. "Ma'am, I apologize for what you've been through. Let's get you checked out immediately." He signaled to one of the officers, who quickly called for medical assistance. Maria, relieved by the turn of events yet still shaken, nodded her gratitude. Derek stayed by her side, his protective presence a comfort as they awaited the arrival of the medical team. The sergeant stayed nearby, ensuring that Thompson and the other officers did not interfere further, while also speaking quietly into his radio, likely reporting the incident to his superiors. As the ambulance arrived, Derek helped Maria transfer to the stretcher, his concern palpable but his demeanor resolute in ensuring his wife's safety and well-being. The medical team quickly assessed her condition, confirming the need for immediate care, which further validated Derek's actions and highlighted the inappropriateness of the police response. The sergeant observed the situation, his face reflecting a mix of concern and disapproval of how the initial officers had handled the situation. He approached Derek as Maria was being attended to. "I'll be following up on this incident personally," he assured Derek. "What happened here wasn't right, and we need to ensure it doesn't happen again." Derek nodded, his gaze firm. "Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate your intervention. It's crucial that those in power remember their duty to protect and serve all citizens, without bias or unnecessary force." As Maria was loaded into the ambulance, Derek turned to join her, his hand squeezing hers reassuringly. The sergeant watched them leave, the seriousness of the incident etched in his features. He then turned back to address his officers, particularly Thompson, ready to debrief and initiate what would likely be a rigorous review of their conduct. In the end, the incident at the park was a stark reminder of the delicate balance between law enforcement and civil rights, a moment that underscored the importance of empathy, proper training, and the responsibility of those in power to uphold justice fairly and respectfully. But as catalysts for change, the collective response from the onlookers reinforced their resolve, and it became clear that this incident wouldn't simply fade into the background. Derek helped Maria to her feet, his protective nature evident as he ensured she was stable and comfortable. The sergeant, now in control of the situation, nodded in their direction, a gesture that signaled not only acknowledgement but also respect for their dignity. As the crowd dispersed, the murmurs of support and the sound of their footsteps fading into the distance, Derek and Maria shared a moment of quiet solidarity. They were aware of the road ahead, the challenges they would likely face in their fight for justice, but they were also aware of the strength they had found in each other and in the support of strangers who had stood by them. "We will get through this," Derek assured her, squeezing her hand gently. "And we'll make sure it leads to change." Maria, her spirit buoyed by the support, nodded. "We've got to use this to help others too," she said. "Nobody should have to go through what I did today." As they walked slowly away from the scene, Derek's thoughts turned to the next steps. He knew he would need to follow through meticulously, ensuring that every detail of the incident was documented and reported. He planned to contact his superiors at the FBI as soon as possible, not only to inform them of his personal involvement, but to seek their support in addressing the broader issues of police conduct and accountability. Meanwhile, the sergeant, his own mind heavy with the weight of the day's events, led Thompson and the other officers away, intent on debriefing them and initiating a thorough review of their actions. This incident would likely spur a series of discussions and possibly reforms within the department, a silver lining to an otherwise dark day. Maria and Derek reached their car, and as Derek helped Maria inside, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This ordeal had shown him the importance of his role not just as an FBI agent but as a citizen, a husband, and a soon-to-be father who must fight for what's right. As they drove away, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park where they had planned to enjoy a peaceful day. The events of the day were a stark reminder of the unpredictability of life and the ever-present need for vigilance in the face of authority. But as they left the scene behind, they were not disheartened. Instead, they were determined, ready to face whatever challenges might come their way in their pursuit of justice and reform. The incident at the park would not be forgotten. It would be a catalyst for change, a story retold as a reminder of the power of standing up against wrongdoing, and a testament to the enduring strength of individuals when they come together for a common cause. But invigorated by the support and the impact of the day, the rally had not just been a gathering. It had transformed into a powerful statement of collective determination and a demand for systemic change. As they sat together in the quiet of their home, Derek reflected on the speeches and the faces in the crowd. Each story had resonated with him, reinforcing the urgency of the cause they had now become central figures in. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but the day's events had fortified his resolve to push forward, to ensure that the momentum didn't wane. Maria, too, felt a profound shift within herself. The rally had been emotionally taxing, yet hearing the support and seeing the sea of faces had given her a newfound strength. She knew the fight for justice was far from over, but today had shown her that they were not alone in their struggle. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Derek and Maria worked closely with their lawyer, the civil rights organization, and other community leaders to strategize the next steps. Meetings were filled with discussions on legal actions, public statements, and plans for further rallies. As the case against Officer Thompson and the department's conduct continued to develop, media coverage and public interest remained high. Derek was often contacted for interviews and to speak at events, becoming an increasingly recognized voice for reform. Maria, despite the ongoing challenges, took an active role in speaking at community centers and schools, sharing their story and the importance of standing up against injustice. Her resolve turned her into an advocate for change, her narrative powerful and inspiring. One evening, Derek and Maria sat down with their son Jordan, explaining to him in simple terms what had happened and why they were so involved in these efforts. Jordan, young but perceptive, listened intently, his understanding growing about the importance of fairness and supporting others. Months passed, and while the legal battles were taxing, the couple saw incremental changes beginning to take shape. The police department initiated several internal reviews and, under public pressure, started implementing new training programs aimed at preventing similar incidents. These changes were small but significant, and Derek and Maria knew that each one was a step towards a more just system. On the anniversary of the rally, the community gathered again, this time to celebrate the progress that had been made and to remind everyone of the work still ahead. Derek and Maria stood together, once more addressing the crowd, not just as victims of a past injustice, but as leaders of a movement that had sparked hope and action across the community. Their journey had started with a traumatic day in the park, but had grown into something much larger than themselves. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the belief that change was possible when people came together to demand it. As they walked hand in hand after the event, surrounded by friends, supporters, and a community united for change, Derek and Maria felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. They had transformed their pain into action, and in doing so, they were helping to shape a future where what happened to them would be less likely to happen to anyone else. Their commitment to justice and equality was unwavering, fueled by the love for their family and their community, driven by the belief that together they could make a lasting difference. Buoyed by the overwhelming support they had received, Derek and Maria felt a renewed sense of purpose. But even as they tried to reclaim moments of peace, the battle for justice continued. Derek's phone rang incessantly, flooded with calls from reporters, lawyers, and supporters. Each conversation was a stark reminder of the stakes and the importance of their fight. A week later, a small but significant victory came. The local police department announced that Officer Thompson had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. For Derek and Maria, this was just the beginning. Determined to push forward, they filed their lawsuit, demanding accountability not only for themselves, but for every individual who had endured similar abuses of power. Media attention intensified as national outlets began covering the story, shining a spotlight on the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to occur. Derek found himself speaking at more events, sharing their story and advocating for meaningful reform. He knew that stepping into the public eye brought risks, making his family potential targets for those resistant to change, but he also understood that keeping the pressure on was the only way to make progress. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Derek sat with Maria and Jordan in their living room. The TV hummed softly in the corner, airing a news segment about the ongoing investigation. Jordan was curled up on the couch, his head resting on Maria's lap as she gently stroked his hair. "Daddy," Jordan asked, his small voice breaking the silence, "are they going to make that mean man go away?" The question hit Derek hard, cutting straight to the core of why they were fighting. He glanced at Maria, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Leaning forward, he rested his elbows on his knees and spoke honestly. "I don't know, buddy," he said softly, "but we're doing everything we can to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else. And there are so many people who believe in that too." Jordan thought for a moment, his young face etched with a seriousness beyond his years. "I want to help too," he said quietly. "When I grow up, I'll help so no one has to be scared." Maria's eyes welled with tears as she pulled Jordan into a hug. "You're already helping, sweetie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Just by being here, you're helping more than you know." Derek felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the exchange. In that moment, he knew that no matter how daunting the road ahead might be, their family was worth every challenge, every moment of fear. They were fighting for a future where children like Jordan would never have to ask such heartbreaking questions. Months later, the investigation concluded. Officer Thompson faced a disciplinary hearing, and the department, under immense public pressure, announced the implementation of new training programs and a review of its policies. While it wasn't the sweeping reform Derek and Maria had hoped for, it was a step in the right direction, a sign that their efforts had made an impact. Thompson was ultimately stripped of his badge and faced formal charges for his actions at the park. His trial became a public spectacle, with testimonies from witnesses, video evidence, and voices inspired by Derek and Maria's courage. When the verdict was finally read, guilty of abuse of power and misconduct, Derek squeezed Maria's hand, feeling a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't complete justice, but it was validation that their fight had been worth it. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered once again, this time to celebrate. Derek and Maria stood together, hands intertwined, as they looked out at the sea of faces. These were the people who had stood by them, who had lent their voices to the cause, and who had made it possible for change to begin. As they left the courthouse with the sun shining down on them, they carried a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced darkness, endured fear, and refused to be broken. Now, they were ready to continue building a future where no one would have to endure what they had faced. Their fight for justice was far from over, but they were prepared for whatever came next, side by side, strengthened by their love and the community that had rallied behind them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Check out our other stories for more powerful and inspiring moments. Your support means everything. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more compelling content.